Congress didn't stand a chance to win the elections. And Vajpayee ji was extremely popular. People said there's no way that Congress can come to power. And I remember Shashi in his remarks, the event was at the Intercontinental Hotel on Marine Drive. You actually
remember who launched the book?
That's right, and Dr. Manmohan Singh launched the book when he was leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha. And I still remember that night when we hosted a dinner for Shashi. One of my father's dear friends, a senior banker, Govind, actually said the words to me that please tell Murli Bhai that he should look at new leadership. Dr. Manmohan Singh perhaps has no future in the Congress party, has no future in Indian politics. And the nature of how disruptive Indian politics is, 3 months later, Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister of India. But I've known Shashi since then, and in 2009 when he decided to take the plunge and join us into electoral politics, and I was talking to Shashi in the car about it, he almost immediately became a union minister. He was a Minister of Foreign Affairs, did an excellent job. And when he resigned as a minister and went back to being a member of parliament in the Lok Sabha representing the people of Trivandrum, and not just an effective MP in parliament but in the streets and in the villages of Trivandrum, I didn't think Shashi would survive the hustle and bustle of electoral politics in India. But I would say Shashi has outdone everyone's expectations, and he's clearly a survivor. And if Indian politics was a stock market, I would go very long on Shashi.
Oh, okay. You're close to the stock exchange, it's the right place to say it. Would you say that you've survived? How do you view your own journey? I mean, this is just to sort of make everyone aware of where you both stand.
Right. Actually, you know, I was a UN official when Milind Deora came to the United. Is the mic working? I've got the sense it isn't picking up much. Is it all right? Do I need to raise it higher? Yeah, that would be slightly better. He was a very active parliamentarian on the international circuit. He was a leading member of a group called the Parliamentarians for Global Action. And in that capacity, he came to the UN headquarters, and being the absolutely brilliant and tireless networker that he is, he discovered me very early on, and we became very good friends very early. I'm talking early 90s, at which point Milind was, I think, possibly still in shorts, but we won't go there.
I still am occasionally.
And so every year he would come to New York, and we would see quite a lot of each other. Whenever I came to Bombay, which I'm sorry to say was less frequently. Yeah, if you got another mic, I wouldn't mind that. This is definitely not behaving properly. Anyway, so whenever I came to Mumbai, I would see him, and that's how I got to know Milind. So yeah, we've had this very interesting journey. We should turn this off, minimize. Yeah. Not much better, but slightly. At least it's not going to cut in and out, I think, every second. I still remember his dad telling me, you know, I think Milind is game to fight the 2004 elections, but I'm not sure if the party will think he's too young and so on. And of course, I wasn't here for the elections, but when I came by after our unexpected triumph, one of our victors and the youngest MP, I guess, in India,
one of them, yes.
Or you and Sachin were the two youngest in India, was my good friend Milind. And I've seen his political journey since then as well, and he's really acquired a tremendous amount of stature and clout within the Congress movement. As for myself, yeah, Milind was saying something which I'm touched by. By the way, you folks who are standing at the back, these empty chairs we've just vacated are all yours. Don't have to stand the whole time. Politics was, in some ways, yes, a completely foreign terrain to me, because I was working in a very different sort of place when you think about the United Nations. And at the same time, it had always been a matter of great interest to me. I was an elected student leader in my college days at Delhi University, St. Stephen's College. I was union president. It was a non-political union, but it did give me an opportunity to meet Indira Gandhi and so on, so I wasn't totally cut off from all this. I was fascinated by the subject. My PhD was on aspects of India's political development, and in my books, I hope I've shown some awareness of the larger issues of Indian politics. But I never assumed that I'd ever have a political career because I had no political background, no family tree to climb up on, and that's not, no, I'm getting it out of the way right now. That's not uncommon. I mean, that is very often, and you can analyze it in classic political science terms: the existence of name recognition, the existence of support networks, the existence of patronage structures, all of which make it possible for somebody from a political family to have a head start over somebody else. And there's nothing particularly surprising or wrong about that. In fact, the famous case in America that I wrote about in the mid-70s, a candidate in Massachusetts who didn't campaign for a single day, no one knew what he stood for anything, but his name was John Adams, who was, of course, Massachusetts' first ever president of the United States, the second after Washington, the first from Massachusetts. The name John Adams, every school child knows from their school books. And just the name recognition alone, the guy won the seat. And so these things happen, and you can understand that in politics. But I'm just saying I didn't have any of that. So I didn't think I'd ever have an opportunity. But I think partly because of the attention my race for Secretary General got, and perhaps some of the attention that my writings had got, I was pleasantly surprised to be offered a chance at tilting at this particular windmill, and I leapt at it. And it was very interesting because when Milind talks about whether I would have been able to adjust, I remember in that first election, my opponents, at that point, the two previous elections, the seat had been won by the Communist Party. This is Kerala after all. The Communists decided to run a campaign of, look at this fellow, he can only go around in three-piece suits and sit in air-conditioned offices. How can he represent us? He can't even speak our language properly. That was sort of the attack. And that was the easiest thing to disprove, because there I was in the hottest days of the hottest month of the year, trudging around the dusty, street corners and fields in my Kerala munda or dhoti and talking to them in passable, not brilliant, but passable Malayalam. And at the end of my speech, I'd say, look, you can see I have enough Malayalam to understand your problems and your needs. And what's more important for you, I've got the English and Hindi to express them in Delhi, which is what you really want. Somebody who speaks far better than me here is not necessarily going to do an effective job for you there. So I swept to a record win, and they haven't tried that argument again. But that adjustment was necessary, and it was not easy. In fact, fighting that election may be the slimmest I've ever been. And at the end of it all, as Milind said, I had a few ups and downs. In fact, the downs have largely outnumbered the ups. But one just has to take the rough with the smooth. I felt in some ways that though I sorely missed the foreign ministry, and some people told me it missed me too, the truth was that I would probably never have been re-elected from any place in Kerala. I'd remained in the foreign ministry for 5 years because I was constantly traveling, and when I wasn't traveling, I was receiving dignitaries in Delhi, whereas what a Kerala constituency wants is an MP who's out there talking to them, seeing their problems, relating to them. And losing the ministry gave me a chance to do that. And that, I think,
and
was...
moving to HRD.
And then when I moved to HRD, which was actually a good 2 years later, for 2 years I was on the back benches, sitting directly behind Rahul Gandhi, as it happens. But during those 2 years, I think I really got into a far more intimate connection with the electorate than would have been possible if I just stayed where I was. So in some ways, the proverb about silver linings and clouds is actually true. I did have to make a rough adjustment. But at the same time, I think I benefited from it, and as a result, I'm a better MP. And at the same time, I think comfortable enough in that role to be a better minister if the opportunity comes around again, as Milind and I hope it will.
But I would add that I think it's fascinating, even for someone like me who's been in electoral politics 5 years before Shashi got in, to look at his tweets, especially with regards to his engagement with his constituents. Because it's incredible for all of us even now, it's almost unbelievable as to how voters often don't judge you or your performance based on how you participate in parliament or how you spend your MP LADS, but whether you're able to solve local issues, whether you're able to attend enough weddings, whether you're able to attend funerals. And that's just the robustness essentially of India's democracy. And I think Shashi, who has such a vast following on Twitter and social media all over the world, I think it's fascinating for people overseas as well, Shashi, to observe Indian politics through the medium of your Twitter handle.
So let me take you both back a little bit to 2014. So let's say you were picking up the threads in 2014. Let's say you were re-elected. What are the 2 or 3 things that you both would be focusing on? And obviously you would come back into different ministries, or maybe you would have not got a ministerial berth, but you would, let's say that you were continuing and you were picking up exactly where you were leaving off in May 2014. Let me ask both of you, what are the things that you would be concerned with most? What would be your priority?
Well, one area that I've sort of been concerned with from the time I got into politics, Govind, in 2004, and I think I've spoken to you many a times about it as well, is the challenge of urbanization in India. I think that for a long time there's been, and a welcome bias towards rural problems. And we all believe agriculture has been given a raw deal. We all think that agriculture should be given a lot more focus than it has been in the last 4 years. We all need to eat ultimately. But I think urbanization and the challenges and the opportunities that urbanization pose have been grossly ignored. So many a times, along with MPs from New Delhi, with MPs from Bangalore, cutting across party lines, we would often raise discussions in Parliament in 2004, 2009, just to get the government's attention towards urbanization. When we were in power, we came up with the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, which, as we know, the government of India has a very limited amount of power to influence urban issues. It's really left to state governments. But we got the government of India to put pressure on state governments to essentially compete against one another to get more central funds. And that had a lot of positive benefits in different cities. But one area which I, for one, have been sort of talking about for a long time, at least since 2004, and again, this is something Shashi and I spoke about in the car while coming here, and I'm glad to see Shashi taking that forward and introducing a private member's bill in Parliament, is that today, if I were to poll people in this room, most of you who are from Mumbai, some who might be from Thane, most people don't even know the name of Mumbai's mayor. And that's the failure actually of urban governance, not just in Mumbai but in our country. And an idea that I've been propagating for a long time is that we in Indian cities, not just in few states which have this, Madhya Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, but in every city, we need to have a concept of a directly elected mayor. A directly elected mayor means the mayor will be more accountable, will be more powerful, and will eventually be able to deliver.
Right. So we'll come to the state of India today, but would you say therefore that even as we are today in 2018, this continues to be your priority or the area that you think?
Well, that's an area which I mean, I have a bias again because I've represented South Mumbai and Mumbai for so long, but another area that I've been very passionate about is, how do we really structurally improve governance? And I had the opportunity to initiate the debate on the Right to Information Bill in 2005. When I was a union minister in the Ministry of Communications and IT, I had the opportunity to lead the government's national e-governance plan. And I personally believe that when we saw the Anna Hazare protests a few years ago, when we were in power really, and at that time the conversation was about having a Lokpal, about having a new set of bureaucrats to oversee an existing set of bureaucrats. I always believe that the solution to corruption in India is not by adding another layer of bureaucrats, but by actually reducing bureaucrats. If we can, to use an internet term, disintermediate government, if I can reduce the interface between a citizen and government, that, according to me, is how we can reduce corruption. Right. So that kind of structural reform, that shift, right, which is RTI.
So we've got two points that you've raised as an important, points of continuity from your past. What about you?
No, I happen to agree with Milind, but let me say first of all that actually your question is not fair. Simply because it does matter what ministry you get, since in our system, you are simply not allowed to interfere in other ministers' work. Sure. So I may have strong ideas on directly elected mayors. Indeed, I've written about it, written op-eds, I've introduced a private member's bill. I believe passionately, like Milind, that you need somebody who's accountable, who's given a fixed term, who's not vulnerable to legislative whim, who has a clear budget and control and authority to make certain decisions, and then you can hold the person accountable. We don't have that system. We have a system which actually privileges inefficiency. A mayor is a powerless chairman chairman of a helpless council of people, none of whom are power either. And at the end, in fact, most power is actually wielded by the unelected bureaucrats who are accountable to the state chief minister. That's another story. But I'm just saying that the electorate, I mean, if Milind says, no, none of you here knows the name of the mayor, it's because what the mayor does doesn't matter. It doesn't actually affect your lives. He has no power. So that's the reason perhaps why people have not felt it necessary to know his name. By the way, that wasn't true when a certain Milind Deora was mayor, I might add. He kind of made his presence felt. But having said that,
No, I think
if I were to have been given...
No, whether you were or weren't, I'm just trying to understand what are the threads that you would have been picking up 4 years ago?
So, for example,
What
I
matters to you the
happen
most?
to have had a lot of unfinished business in HRD because I only had a year and a half. And the last half year was frankly wasted because as you're heading towards the electoral front, pretty much no work is done in any ministry in the 6 months before an election, a general election. So it was just about a year. It wasn't enough to make much of an impact. There's a lot we need to do in our education. I think our higher education is over-regulated and under-governed. I would have definitely tried to push harder the regulatory reform that we tried to initiate and didn't get through, abolishing the UGC, doing something about the various councils. The medical council was under the health ministry, but there's another example of a regulatory body that needs to be fixed when it comes to educational policies. And then as far as school education is concerned, we had to move away from a kind of rote system we have of regulation to one in which the emphasis is on learning outcomes. And these were all insights we had, plus vocational training for those who just didn't have the aptitude for, higher education. That would have been important too. So to cut a long story short, yes, education, I had strong ideas on, never got a chance to pursue. Similarly, foreign affairs, I had certain, if you like, experience or skills I would have liked to have pursued in order to give India a more creative and coherent role in the world than we've seen over the last 5 years. But it would, if you were to ask me for general principles that I would have pursued wherever I was, and even if I wasn't in a ministry, those are the kinds of principles I've been pursuing in opposition now. I believe passionately in trying to expand the freedoms available to Indian citizens, which are basically enshrined in the Constitution, but denied to many of us in practice, denied to our LGBT community, for example, denied to anybody whose dissent is seen by a state government or even a local cop as crossing the border of the sedition law, denied to people who have dared to express ideas and values or even draw cartoons that excite the wrath of those in power. We need to expand our freedoms and ensure that our democracy actually means what it's supposed to mean to enough individuals. And that's one area I would have been determined to work on. I agree with Milind completely about governance. A lot of things we can do better and differently. And whichever ministry you are, you can improve the way that ministry is governed. And finally, there's no question that, that we have some serious issues relating to the fact that such a large portion of our population is young. I mean, 65% is under 35. A majority is under 25. And you've got a situation in which we have the world record for the largest gap between the average age of the population and the average age of the cabinet. We actually held that record since UPA 2. When the last cabinet reshuffle of the Manmohan Singh government actually took the gap even higher because we named a couple of 80-odd-year-old ministers. But the fact is that, the record hasn't been lowered that dramatically under Mr. Modi either. So we are looking at a time in which the young are the majority of this country, and yet they seem to have the least voice in political decision-making, in parliament, in government. And that also needs to be fixed. One could say the same about women. If we had more women in positions of political authority, would the kind of male attitudes to violence against women and issues involving women have persisted? Would they be able to get away with it? I think that these are things that need to be addressed as well.
So in some ways, and let me come back to you, Milind, as well. So you're saying that the themes that were foremost on your mind in 2014 are quite different from the ones that are on your mind today? Or are you thinking quite differently in terms of what this nation's priorities are? No, and that really brings us to the theme that we are trying to address today.
No, there are some similarities and there's some issues, like I said, governance, urbanization, the issues Shashi spoke about, improving the education system, which in a country as large and diverse as ours, they'll always be work in progress. But I think the fundamental issue which is very different from our government and this government and our party and this party in power is that the social cohesion that we tried to build in this country over several decades, and most certainly in the last 10 years while Shashi and I were MPs and union ministers, is quickly falling apart. And I think that particular issue is often considered to be, a social and a political problem, but we often ignore the fact that it can also quickly develop into a national security problem. When we move away from the social and political side and we talk about economic issues, Shashi mentioned to me that on his flight today, a businessman met him and said that he's concerned about how the economy is where the economy is headed. And that's something I get to hear every single day from businessmen, entrepreneurs, and industrialists. Now,